Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 29 of the Should Have Gone Pro podcast. Welcome back. Hope everyone is doing well. I know we took a little bit of a hiatus there, but we both had some personal live stuff going on. But um, we we got some newfound motivation back, and we're ready to rock and roll. So um, today we're gonna touch on some NFL draft stuff. We did our mock draft right before the draft, and that turned out a little bit different than the actual draft, to say the least. Um, so we're gonna talk about who we thought did well, who didn't, bust steals, all that kind of stuff, and go from there. So, Brock, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I was very wrong on the Malik Willis to the
Yeah,
Panthers at 6. That turned out to be very incorrect,
I think we all
actually.
were.
But hey, yeah, it was still a pretty exciting draft. Um, couple of surprises, but I feel like for the most part, the guys went here and there where a lot of people projected them to go, just not necessarily us.
Yeah, um, that's for sure. So just looking at it, Trayvon Walker going one. It was all the rumors were true. Um, and he did end up going first overall despite the iffy college production. Hutchinson went two. We were both of us were a little surprised that Stingley went three over Sauce Gardner, who went number four. Um, I love Sauce Gardner, and I think that he's going to be a better corner in the league than Stingley. Not that Stingley's going to be bad, but the fact that Sauce didn't allow a touchdown in his whole college career is just absolutely nuts. Um, and then looking at that, Thibodeau at five. So that was kind of the top five there. Some teams moved up a bit. Lions moved up 20 spots to go get Jameson Williams. Um, I know there was a lot of trades in like the teens and 20s.
It
Ravens,
was a lot.
Saints. There was a lot of trades. Some teams moving around a little bit, so um, that might have messed up our mock draft a little bit too, because it was a ton of trades that we didn't expect to happen. But
I mean,
um,
I feel like every year there's trades in the draft, obviously, but
yeah,
I feel like this year in particular, there was so many. I mean, so many big names were moving. I mean, Hollywood Brown to the Cardinals,
yeah,
AJ Brown to the Eagles. I mean,
hmm
it was a crazy draft night for sure. And I mean, yeah, I think that definitely threw a lot of stuff off. Jets, I think they moved back into the first round again, right, for 26 to get Johnson.
yeah,
I mean,
hmm
crazy. A lot of moving parts in this year's NFL draft for sure.
yeah. And it's good that you brought up those two trades too, because with Hollywood, especially with D Hop being out for 6 games now, they really needed another receiver, and they lost Kirk in the offseason. So I think that was a great move for the Cardinals there, especially since Kyler and Hollywood have that Oklahoma connection. Um, and then AJ Brown to the Eagles was something that I didn't expect to happen at all. The Titans getting rid of AJ Brown because the receiver core went from what we thought at this point last year was stacked with AJ Brown and Julio, um, and it pretty much just collapsed and fell apart. They traded AJ Brown to the Eagles, which I think is a great move to pair with Devontae Smith.
And
You
Dallas
got
Goddard at tight end.
Yeah, a big body weapon for Hurts, um, and I think that's a great trade for the Eagles. And then the Titans ended up taking Traylon Burks, the receiver from Arkansas, with that pick that they got in the trade. And I, speaking of the Titans, they waited until 80 something to finally take Malik Willis off the board um, to be the backup to Tannehill, and I think the Titans are in a really weird spot right now. The receiver core is really degraded to the point where Tannehill is going to struggle more. Um, you wonder what their timeline is for Malik Willis. Tannehill doesn't sound like he's interested in even helping out the guy, which is just a bad teammate. Um, and it's really an interesting situation there from a team that was the one seed last year to I don't even know how good they're even going to be this year. I mean, Derrick Henry's still going to be a monster, but there's a lot of questions on that roster. So that's one of the teams that's really surprising me after this draft with where their mindset is for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I expected Debo Samuel. I was a little surprised he didn't get traded on draft night.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like that was the one piece I was waiting to fall and kind of see what happens there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Tennessee this year. I think they really regressed in that division. I think they're right now a lot worse at quarterback and receiver and offensive line than the Colts. I think their defenses are pretty similarly compared. But I mean, I think that's the Colts division to win now. And then I think the Eagles took a giant step forward as long as Jalen Hurts can have another season similar to what he did last year. Obviously, make some improvements in the accuracy and the decision making. And I think Philadelphia is a threat to win that division this year. I think they're a lot better than Dallas. I thought they had a really good draft in general, especially getting A.J. Brown from the Titans, getting Jordan Davis as kind of an anchor in the middle of that defense is going to make them a lot better defensively up front. And as long as Jalen Hurts can show a little bit more this year, like I said, work on that accuracy, I think Philadelphia has a legitimate chance to, I don't want to say run away with that division, but it is the NFC least for a reason. So I think right now they're easily the best team in that division. And I don't really think it's going to be. I mean, I think Dallas can make a claim, but I think just in terms of roster, what Philadelphia has on both sides of the ball, what they added now in the draft, I think they're a lot better than the Cowboys right now.
Well, you just pissed off a lot of Cowgirl fans, that's for sure. But I mean, I agree that the Eagles are going to be in that race for the division for sure. They definitely got better, and the Cowboys didn't necessarily improve a whole lot. They lost several people over the offseason. They took a tackle in the draft from Tulsa who I wasn't the highest on, and I feel like it's going to be a big year for Dallas to kind of figure out if this is the core they want to stick with or if they need to keep blowing up some pieces in it. But obviously you keep Micah Parsons around, and Dak, I guess. But after that, I mean, a lot of questions there. Zeke Elliott is going downhill. So, yeah, I feel like the Eagles are trending upwards, and Dallas is moving the opposite direction. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch there in the fall. So looking at this draft, I'm mainly looking at the first round, but I guess the draft in general too, because there was some big names that went later. What teams are you thinking had some of the best drafts and really either got the best prospects or filled the right holes to move forward?
And I think the Jets did an outstanding job in this draft. I mean, at 4, you get Sauce Gardner, who was rated as the best corner. And I think the Jets were ecstatic that Houston pivoted and went with Stingley. I mean, granted, Stingley, I think he was one of those prospects that a lot of people didn't really know how to evaluate because he had 2 bad years at LSU, but that bad injury-riddled years with LSU. But that freshman year in 2019 when they went undefeated and won the Natty, he was terrific as a true – I mean, you're starting on a national championship defense as a true freshman. But to get Sauce at 4 and then get a lot of people were saying the best receiver, Garrett Wilson at 10 after London went 8 to the Falcons. And then Jets traded back into the first round to get Jermaine Johnson, the second, who I was surprised he fell that far. I think he was one of those guys that had a lot of momentum going into the draft. I think he was a lot of mocks. He was a top 10 pick, certainly a top 15 pick. For him to fall all the way to 26, where the Jets snatched him up, I think is terrific value. I know a lot of people were clamoring for Dallas to draft him at 24. It would have filled a void that was left by Randy Gregory flipping and going to the Broncos. But they went with Tyler Smith. Toots their own. They needed help on the offensive line as well. But for the Jets to get him at 26 and then to follow that up with to get Breece Hall, the best running back available at the beginning of the second round, really good first 2 rounds for the Jets. I still don't think they're – I mean, it's the Jets. They're bound to do something dumb. I don't really think Zach Wilson's that guy, but they're certainly going to be a lot more interesting this year. Robert Saleh has some pieces now on defense to work with in Sauce and Jermaine Johnson. We'll see what Garrett Wilson can do for their receiving core. But I really like what the Jets did. I think they, by far and away, had the best draft, and they're certainly a better football team today than they were before the draft started. So, I mean, hats off to the Jets for once. You've got your shining moment. Let's see if hopefully these guys can turn into some players and that franchise can get turned around, headed in the right direction.
Yeah, for a team that has taken constant bashing over the years, and I'm still not high on Zach Wilson personally, but I feel like they got some really solid pieces here that can fill some holes on a team that has so many holes. I mean, at this point, you're just hoping to plug as many of those as you can with these draft picks here, and I think they did great doing just that. I think Garrett Wilson might help a lot with the improvement of Zach Wilson, so a little Wilson connection there. But two teams I was looking at were the Ravens. I think had a great draft. They had a really banged up secondary last year, and then they get Kyle Hamilton, who I feel like fits their defense well as that safety role. A guy who can really could end up being the leader of that defense in the next year or two. And I see him. I relate him a lot to Harrison Smith and the Vikings. Just a really reliable safety where you're not gonna have to worry about a lot of these mistakes, and he can kind of do everything. You can put him down in the box or back in coverage. So I think he was a good pick for them at 14. And then you move down in the draft some. In the first round, they got at 25. They got Tyler Lindenbaum, the center, who I was pretty high on. I think you could move him around to either the guard spots as well, and he would still do well. I think he was a great snag for them to kind of beef up that O-line because with Lamar, he's going to need as much protection as possible if he's going to be scrambling around like a madman. So, and then they also in the second round got David Ojabo, who was projected as a top 15 pick until his injury during his pro day. Really a shame. And I think getting him and knowing that he might not play a lot this season, coming back from the injury, but if you're looking forward to the future and the potential that he has, to pair him up with Odafe Owe, I think that would be a dangerous pass rush duo coming off the edges. And then it's another team I was thinking of too was the Chiefs. I feel like the Chiefs had a pretty good draft, getting McDuffie and Karlaftis in the first round for a team that really needed to secure some of those defensive holes because you saw them getting into these shootouts with teams like when they did with the Bills in the playoffs. They got into some with the Chargers and Raiders and stuff like that. So I think these are two picks that you can kind of plug and play right away. And I think they're really going to help widen that margin a little more for the offense to not have to worry as much about getting a touchdown every single drive. So I think those were two that went a little bit under the radar. The Ravens and the Chiefs having really good drafts. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias, but I do think the Lions had a great draft, getting what people consider was the best player in Hutchinson, and then trading up 20 spots to get Jameson Williams. The Lions traded up 20 spots 2 times in this draft with the Vikings only to give up pick number 100 to do that. So I think that was a great deal for the Lions to do that. They needed another receiver to pair with Amon-Ra, who had a spectacular rookie season. And I think that the Lions are definitely moving in the right direction. Got some guys that will fit their culture great. But, yeah, besides the Lions, I think the Ravens and the Chiefs were two teams that really stood out to me. So,
yeah, Chiefs got Sky Moore as well, so hopefully a replacement for Tyreek Hill. We'll see. So, but yeah, I mean that was a team that I was going to mention if you weren't. But yeah, I thought Detroit had a good draft. I mean, I think Jameson Williams. A lot of people were saying he would have been the first receiver taken off the board if he didn't tear his ACL I like him to Detroit. I think Jared Goff obviously needs weapons. You can never have enough. But when you pair him with, like you mentioned, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a really good year, the tight end, Hawkinson from Iowa, who just keeps crapping out NFL tight end talent, which is just ridiculous. Feels like the only thing they're good at is just offensive linemen and tight ends, but those are two important positions. So keep cranking them out, Iowa. But yeah, I think it was a great pick. I mean, with Detroit, you can be patient with Williams. You don't need him to come back right away, which obviously he's not going to anyway. They're going to be patient. He'll be back middle of the season, more than likely. To be perfect, I don't think Detroit's going to be contending for anything this year, but I certainly think they're a lot more improved. And I think no team in the league last year was more unlucky than Detroit in terms of some of the games they lost. I mean, you lose a 63-yard field goal by Tucker as time expires. They should have beat the Bears both times last year. I'll fully admit that those games were ugly. Detroit deserved to win them. So I mean, if you're Detroit, if you can get some of those close games in your favor, I mean, Detroit would have been floating right around 500 last year, I think. I mean, really and truly, if you look at some of those games they lost, they were in a lot of them right down to the wire. So I think they're a lot better of a football team. But yeah, they also got a safety from Illinois, so a little bit of homegrown talent making their way in the NFL. But yeah, no, I think those are some good choices for teams that had a good draft. I mean, the Ravens again, they seem to hit it out of the park every year, and that's why they're so good. But yeah, I like those picks for teams that had a good draft. And then, I mean, you got anything for teams that struggled? I got one off the top of my head. I feel like New England, I was a little confused what they were doing. Cole Strange, a lot of people had him going in the second or third round. They took him, 24th, 25th? Got to check here.
29.
Took him still high. Took him 29, and then they drafted Bailey Zappi from Western Michigan in like the 5th or 6th or 7th rounds. At that point, they all blend together, but it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I feel like New England every year just tries to be smarter than everybody else, and they got the guy from Tennessee, Chattanooga, and who a lot of people were saying could have been available way later than that.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, to draft a quarterback a year after you drafted Mac Jones, you're hoping it's going to be your franchise guy when you already had Hoyer, and they just traded Jarrett Stidham, but they had Stidham and Hoyer on the roster. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. New England was definitely head scratching to me. I feel like they're so bad at drafting, and it's just confusing that they've been a dynasty for that long. But I mean, they just cannot figure out the draft at all. I mean, they struggled again. N'Keal Harry was a bust, and I don't hate the Cole Strange pick. He could be a great player, but it just feels like there was better people available who could help you for value, and you could have used a pick on Strange in the second or third round when he likely still would have been available.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's the pretty much everyone's going to clear pick for disappointing because they had some holes to fill, and they were a playoff team last year that kind of hung around fighting for the division with the Bills until late in the season. So you would think that they would just need to fill a couple more holes, and they could do that in the draft to kind of solidify themselves. And yeah, taking Zapp when they don't need a quarterback. I think Mac Jones is their guy, so that was a little confusing as well. Not sure what the thought process was there. I look at the Commanders too. I think they reached a little bit for Jahan Dotson, seeing that so many receivers are coming off the board. I think they just felt the peer pressure to take Dotson. I don't have anything against Dotson. I think he would have been a good late round pick, but they picked him at 16. I could have seen him going late 20s maybe, and that was a little surprising to me, especially with the holes that team has. Some of their O-line, secondary, and that one was a little surprising. And if you look back at the draft as a whole, it looked okay at the time. But thinking about it now, the Steelers picking Kenny Pickett in the first round, they definitely I feel like they could have waited for that and fill a different hole because no quarterback went again until middle of the third round with Desmond Ritter. So with the amount of quarterback issues that this draft had, I feel like they could have went a different route with their their top pick there and filled a different hole. I do think Kenny Pickett is going to be a decent quarterback for Pittsburgh, but um, looking back on it, you might think of it as a little bit of a reach with that one. And the yeah, so those are the two that I had, the Commanders and the Steelers. And then there were some teams as well that I feel like could have traded in that weren't in the first round. I think the Dolphins, they've been hanging around this 9-8 every single year. Obviously they went out and got Tyreek Hill, and I feel like they could have got some guys that could really they could plug and play day one to really launch this team to playoff caliber every single year, because every year they missed the playoffs by like one game. The fact that they didn't have any picks for a while, I feel like they were a team that should have moved in as well, but ended up just playing it super conservative. So, yeah, those were some of my thoughts about the little disappointments for some of them for sure. But yeah, I think the Patriots is one that sent out to pretty much everybody regarding that one for sure.
I will say I was pretty surprised with, you saw a lot of these teams that had 2 first-round picks packaging something and moving up in the draft to get more talent. I was a little surprised, especially like with New Orleans moving up, just as an example. I feel like it was, and like the Detroit, I feel like it was there for Green Bay to move ahead of, the last receiver that had a first-round grade was Treylon Burks that went to the Titans
Yeah.
before Green Bay obviously picked for the first time. But I feel like, I don't hate the 2 defensive players that Green Bay got, and they still got Watson in the second round, which really pissed me off as a Bears fan because that's who I wanted the Bears to draft.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like the opportunity was there for Green Bay in the first round to move up, and they didn't. That was just my one gripe on them. I thought they had a pretty good draft, really. I mean, you get 2 day one defensive starters. They have a receiver in Watson who's a big body who hopefully is going to help fill some of the void left by Devontae Adams. And they got, I can't remember who else they got. Some guy from, I think, New Mexico later on in the third or fourth.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like when you were looking at what some other teams like New Orleans and the Lions who had those multiple first-round picks, were able to move up and draft a receiver that they liked, I was a little surprised Green Bay maybe didn't do that. But that was really my only gripe. They're always pretty good in the draft, except for the quarterback pick, Love. But whatever. I mean, they got 2 defensive players. They didn't change their strategy of going defense in the first round. But I thought they got good value, and I feel like that's what so much of this draft is about, is the teams that don't reach and wait. Like, I mean, Jermaine Johnson fell into the Jets' lap at 26. Dallas passed up on him. And, I mean, some of these guys, there's always a guy that falls, the inevitable fall in the draft. I mean, the Eagles got the linebacker from Georgia, Nakobe Dean, who a lot of people said was the best linebacker in this class, in the 3rd round because of injury concerns. So, I mean, if he can shake those off and have a good NFL career and be the player that people were projecting him to be, I mean, that's a hell of a steal in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
So, I mean, good. And I a little surprised that Green Bay didn't trade up and get one of those receivers in the high teens. But they stuck with it. Got 2 day one defensive starters, so you can't hate that. The value is there, so they didn't reach on anybody, and I feel like that's all that matters. And I just feel like that's when teams get into they get desperate and like, oh my guy's gone, we got to pivot, we got to fill this position, got to find a guy, and that's when a lot of those reaches happens. And credit for Green Bay, after Burks got picked, they didn't panic and we have to draft the receiver now, like all the guys are gone. They stuck with it. They looked at their board and got 2 solid day one starters on defense.
Yeah, you made some good points about that. I think a lot of people were expecting wide receiver for them for sure, and then there was a flurry of wide receivers before them, so that really put them in a little bit of a predicament. But I do think losing to Darius Smith, I think Quay Walker was a good pick at linebacker. I understand that you want to try and please Aaron Rodgers, and fill the wide receiver hole. They lost Adams and Valdez-Scantling, so Rodgers is going to need people to throw to. And I do think that they could have traded up, being a win now team, knowing that Rodgers is getting older, and you need to make these moves to make your championship run today. I think they could have moved up and snagged one of these receivers, even moved up a little bit more, and gotten maybe a guy like Dotson, who I thought would have dropped later to them, ended up not doing so. Treylon Burks, yeah, there's even moving up to when there was that flurry with the two Ohio State receivers, Olave Wilson and then Jameson Williams. I feel like they could have packaged a trade together to move up to get one of those guys, which would have been a big day one help for Rodgers. And I think that was a little questionable from that aspect, but the defense definitely needed to fill those holes. So I think the Packers ended up doing okay. Because if you panic too much and you reach and then draft a bust, you're gonna regret it way down the line. So, but yeah, there was like a record number of wide receivers taken in this first round, and then just the one quarterback. So it was really interesting seeing that there was this quarterback situation going on, and there was a decent amount taken in the third round. I think that getting those guys that they did in the third round with Ritter to the Falcons, Corral, I think he went third or fourth to the Panthers.
Love those picks.
I do too. And then Malik Willis to Tennessee. I think Matt Corral was a fantastic pick for Carolina, who has two quarterbacks already on that roster that are decent, and definitely guys that can fill the hole for now, but are definitely not going to be your long-term options with Darnold and Cam Newton. But I think that Matt Corral for the long term is a great pick. I was really high on him before the injury. I think he could have potentially been a first-round QB if he didn't get injured in the bowl games. So I think he's the prototype guy that you want in the NFL. Rocket arm, is mobile. You just want to try and improve his scoring. I mean, not scoring. I don't know what I'm saying. You probably want to improve his accuracy a little bit, but other than that, I think that was a great pick for them. And then Ritter, who I was high on as well, going to the Falcons. The fact that they're able to wait to the third round to get him, and the fact that I think he'll be able to compete with Mariota day one is huge. So, yeah, I think that the teams that waited for QBs ended up doing a pretty decent job. So,
yeah, no, I like the Desmond Ritter pick. I think of between him, Kenny Pickett, and Matt Corral. I obviously think Kenny Pickett starts. I don't know, though. I mean, I feel like he goes into camp with Trubisky. I could see Trubisky winning the starting job there. They'd be patient with Pickett, but I definitely think Desmond Ritter has the potential to start pretty soon for Atlanta. Marcus Mariota has been a backup for the last couple of years with the Raiders. But yeah, I'm excited. Between him, Pickett, and Corral, I think those three have the potential to impact their respective teams more their first couple seasons. I still think Malik Willis in Tennessee is certainly a year or two long project, until he shows that he's ready to take over the reins. But I mean, it could be sooner because Tannehill looked really rough in that playoff game. But yeah, I mean, I think the quarterbacks, no one reached for quarterbacks, especially, and I think that was important in a draft like this when there was so much uncertainty about who was the clear-cut number one quarterback. But I was certainly shocked to see only one go in the first round and Ritter fall into you said third round, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there was no quarterback drafted in the second round was pretty crazy. I can't remember the last time that's happened. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure there was a couple records this year in the draft, too. I think Georgia set the record for most defensive players taken, or most players from one team taken.
Yeah, they did.
And, I mean, Cincinnati, 5 or 6 guys drafted. Hell of a job by Cincinnati. I mean, Alec Pierce, the receiver. I know they had a defensive lineman. Their 2 corners, obviously, Sauce and Kobe Bryant. And then Ritter. So, I mean, there's 4 right there, 5 right there. So, most players drafted in the NFL draft from a non-Power 5 school. So, good shout out Luke Fickell
Yeah.
and the job he's done at Cincinnati, turning him into a top 10 contender and now a draft. I don't want to say powerhouse, but I mean, getting 5 guys drafted from one team's a damn good job. So I mean, shout out to what Cincinnati they're building a really good program there. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
for
excited
sure.
for this draft. I feel like a lot of teams got significantly better. A couple teams hit it out of the park, like we mentioned. There's a couple head scratchers, but I feel like that's the same thing for every draft. Um, I mean, I'll go on a little Bears tangent here. I guess I'm warming up to the picks a lot more now. I get getting Gordon first in the second round. Wasn't that many receivers available. We needed help in the secondary. So we got him. I'm fine with that pick. Brisker, he was the one that I was torn on. I like what he does at Penn State. He was very versatile, and I think Eberflus is going to love him in our defense. He's going to make our secondary a lot better. But it's so hard when there was George Pickens, Sky Moore, Jalen Tolbert, several other wide receivers available
Yeah.
at that 48th pick when the Bears drafted, that it's like, damn, it would have been nice to have gotten one of those guys, especially since Pickens went right after to the Steelers. Pierce went right after to the Colts. There was value for the Bears to get there. But I mean, if Brisker is a multiple-time Pro Bowler and our secondary is best in the league next year, which I think it has one of the best in the league next year. I think it has the potential to be. I mean, Jalen Johnson's already a lockdown corner on one side. You pair him with Kyler Gordon, who is gonna be really good, and then you put Brisker back there hawking with Eddie Jackson. I'm excited about that. But I mean, if those two guys turn into 10, 15-year NFL veterans, I mean, the Bears got tremendous value at that pick. Velus Jones in the third. We finally got a receiver. Guy's old, but I think we're going to be able to do a lot with him in the return game, screens, stuff like that. Guy's a burner. Bears need speed. So we got a receiver. And then I'm really excited about the running back we took from Baylor. I think he's Tariq Cohen 2.0, just a little bit bigger. I'm excited to see what he can do out of the backfield, catching the ball and running routes. Another return guy. So I think the Bears had a good draft. It would have been nice to get a receiver earlier than the third round. But they got quality players. They hit the offensive line later in the draft, so hopefully some of those guys can develop. But I feel like it's a lot of these teams. A lot of these guys you get later in the draft, they're developmental guys. So the teams that are able to, hopefully the Bears are one of these teams that are able to find some of those diamonds in the rough, like a lot of these other franchises. I feel like year in and year out, these 5th, 6th, 7th round picks from other teams get developed really well and turn into good NFL players. So hopefully the Bears are able to do a little bit of that. But yeah, no, I think solid draft all around. I think this is the first year. This is the most NFL draft I've watched. I think I watched most of all 7 rounds. So it was
Wow.
it was pretty brutal day 3 in like round 5 when I hadn't heard of any of these guys. But
Yeah, day 3 gets brutal. I couldn't watch much of day 3. It was like an all day thing, and it just drags on to the point where some random team, like the Saints got a backup defensive tackle that I've never heard of, and it's just, I mean, it might end up being important in the future, but yeah, the third day can get a little rough. I did watch the full first and second day, but yeah. But yeah, touching a little on your Bears, I do think they had a pretty decent draft. And I think that they got some quality picks for when they took the guys, but I do worry a little bit about Justin Fields' progression with that depleted receiver core. You would like to see them giving him more weapons to kind of speed up his improvement. So it'll be a real test this season to see if some of these guys in their receiver room can step up and kind of help both themselves and Fields progress, because that's pretty much the main focus in the offense right now, is just getting Fields better and figuring out what you're going to do with his targets. So I think that these picks were solid picks that are going to move them in the right direction, but in a receiver heavy draft, I would like to see them be a little more aggressive for a receiver, but overall, I don't think it was bad for them. Um, yeah, we touched a little bit on my Lions earlier. I was very happy with the draft. Moving up for Jameis Williams was a fantastic pick. I know how much of a beast he was at Bama, and I heard he's supposed to be ready by training camp. So we'll see if that ends up being true. I don't want him to rush it too much, obviously, especially since we're not going to be contenders this year by any means. But I think we're definitely moving in the right direction with the weapons that we're building, and the fact that we didn't reach for a quarterback to be a backup for Goff right now, with a big QB draft next year with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. So I think if we can get one of those two guys next year, we'll be in a great position with what we're building. And a lot of the guys we picked all fit into the culture that Dan Campbell's building. I mean, I I heard when they picked Trayvon Walker at 1 that they immediately called ahead to take Hutchinson. They didn't even have to think about it for a second. So
Wasn't a thought,
um,
yeah.
it was a match made in heaven for those two guys. And unfortunately, I have to wait till June for my Hutchinson jersey to come in the mail. But um,
Oh,
yeah,
you did the same thing last year when the Bears drafted Fields. Immediately that night, pre-ordered
yeah.
Justin Fields Bears jersey. Had to do it. Couldn't
I, I
help
did
myself.
I did
Excited.
the same thing with Kate Cunningham for the Pistons too. I ordered it the night of. Um, But yeah, but then it takes like 3 months to get to you because they got to get the number finalized and everything, and then they got to start production on the jersey, and uh, it takes a little longer than I'd like to because like the hype from the NFL draft wears off, and then one random day in June I'll get the jersey. Well, my mind's not even on football at the moment, but no, I'm happy about it. I do think a lot of teams had really solid drafts to fill holes. Um, and I don't feel like any team necessarily had like a monumentally bad draft. Like if we look back in the history and see some of these teams that just absolutely crap the bed, I don't feel
Raiders.
like yeah, I don't feel like any teams really had monumentally bad drafts where they're gonna look back and say we whiffed on this guy so bad that we could have taken that would have been an absolute monster. Um, so I think it was a great draft for a lot of teams, and I don't think too many people can really be upset about what their team did. So yeah, I think it was good.
Yeah, I agree. I got two questions for before we leave this
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
First one. Do you think Debo Samuel gets traded before the season starts? If you do, give me a team you think he would best fit for. And second question, right now, early rookie of the year prediction for this draft class.
Two great questions. First, I would say I don't think Debo gets traded. Um, I think that this Niners front office is too invested into having him be a part of their offense. I think they're going to work with him the best they can to try and figure this out. It sounds like they have no interest in moving him. Especially, I thought the draft would have been the time that he'd been able to move using the draft picks in these trades. But now that draft picks, I mean, at least for the next 11 months are out of the question. Um, and the prospects in next year's draft, people aren't even thinking that far ahead right now. So I don't think that there's a lot of teams that are also able to salary wise to make things work well, where they could give up enough that the Niners would want with and also be able to take on Debo's salary. So I think he stays put. Long term, I don't know if he'll stay put long term. I question a little more about that because you wonder with the QB situation. I don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, all these teams have quarterbacks now, or at least I thought of a QB now where they're not gonna want Garoppolo. Um, I think the chance to trade him is kind of out the window now. So that was, I think, a big fumble for the Niners if they wanted to move ahead with Trey Lance. Because if you're Trey Lance, I feel like you're almost kind of felt like you were going to be the quarterback for the second season. And if he has to sit behind Garoppolo for a whole other season, I don't think he's going to be too happy about that. But um, I was a little more surprised personally about Garoppolo not getting traded compared to Debo Samuel, but I think he stays put. And I think their asking price too was a little too high. I heard the Lions and the Jets were involved in the trade talks, but they wanted too many high draft picks or some young guys that weren't willing to part with. So, um, and those two teams aren't ready to win now, so I think that wouldn't have been the best move for either side. Um, I think you keep Debo. You tell him um, if you're not happy with the dual role at running back wide receiver, you put him at wide receiver, and that's that. And if you want him to have some running attempts, then you can put him as like on some jet sweeps or some option plays and stuff like that. But I think he stays put, and you work it out. For rookies of the year, offensively, that's that's a great question. I feel like it's tough because this is a really interesting year for offensive rookie of the year because we're not super high on these quarterbacks from this draft. It wasn't a running back taken in the first round. Um, I mean, Brees Hall could have a good year, but I'm thinking it leans wide receiver, and man, that's tough. I'm I'm thinking it's gonna be. Let me look at some of these options here. I think Olave is going to be up there. If Jameis can have a decent year, I think Olave is going to go into this receiver room with the Saints and do great. Michael Thomas is still a question because I don't even know what's going on with him anymore. So if Olave is one of the top options in that for the receiving core, I think he's going to have a really great year. Obviously, I could be a little biased and say Jameson Williams, who's going to get a lot of targets to the Lions this year too. But I do think it's one of those receivers, maybe under the radar a little bit. Could be Treylon Burks since he's going to be so high up on the depth chart compared to other rookies in this class. And then the defensive rookie of the year, I have to go homer here and say Hutchinson. He's what a lot of people thought was the most complete player or prospect in this draft. I think he's going to come into this defense and fit perfectly, and I think he's going to be a dominant rush threat off the edge. It can be hard for guys in the secondary to get defensive rookie of the year unless they really have like a crazy good year as far as forcing turnovers. And I don't know if Sauce Gardner necessarily fits that mold, but I think that he's going to be one of the most productive rookies in this whole class his rookie year, going into the Jets secondary and being matched up with some really good receivers day one. I think he's going to have the chance to really put those skills to the test. I think he'll pass the test. So I could go homer here and say Hutchinson, and I guess I will, but I feel like this defense is this draft class is a lot tougher to pick a defensive. There's a lot more defensive options. I'll say that than there are offensive for rookies of the year. But yeah, those are my picks. How you feeling about those two questions? I feel like those were some good ones.
Yeah, I think now after the draft, I think it's a lot harder to pick a Debo Samuel destination. I mean, I think you could I mean, after the Ravens traded Hollywood to the Cardinals, I feel like they maybe could have used him as a trade piece with the Niners. But yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the teams that were, I mean, obviously you would take a Debo Samuel, a star like that, any day over some of these, guys who you're not sure about that are going to be rookies. But I feel like after the draft, I feel like a lot of these teams, you mentioned Jets and Lions, I feel like they're happy with what they got, and I mean they're going to have to give up a lot for Debo Samuel, pay him a lot of money. And I can't see him going. I mean, if he wants to go to a contender, I just can't really see with some of the moves that these guys have made, like the Chiefs or the Bills. I mean, maybe Green Bay, but again, will they want to give up the draft capital? They haven't really seemed like a team in recent past with their, I guess not ownership, but with Gutekunst, they haven't really shown an ability to make a big swing like this in a trade. So I just don't think right now there's a lot of options, especially now after the draft. I feel like a draft night trade would have been that's what I thought. I thought he was going to get traded on draft night. I kept looking for it, but when he didn't, I don't really know now. I'm a lot more uncertain now that the water's kind of cleared. So I think he stays with San Francisco as well. I think they figure out a way to make him happy. But I mean, I'm all for him getting his money and getting paid. I mean, he's a really good player and did a lot for that offense last year. He deserves to be paid for it.
Yeah.
And then for offensive defensive rookie of the year, I'm gonna give a little bit of a dark horse here. Second round, um, I like Christian Watson from North Dakota State with Green Bay.
Mm.
I mean, Aaron Rodgers has got to throw it to somebody. He's probably easily the best quarterback that a rookie receiver is going to when you look at it. So
Mm.
I think Watson. I mean, if he can be a player, I could see him having a really big year for Green Bay. Green Bay's going to need help at the receiver, obviously. And I mean, I think he's going to do a pretty nice job of helping fill some of those targets that Aaron Rodgers is going to need after Devontae Adams left. And then for defensive rookie of the year, I like Hutchinson. Give me Kayvon Thibodeau though. Thibodeau or Jermaine Johnson. I think both guys kind of slid a little bit. A lot of questions about Kayvon Thibodeau. Said Kevon Looney. Kayvon Thibodeau. But I like him on the Giants. I think they he pairs up nicely with Azeez Ojulari, who they picked last year. So Giants have a nice two dynamic young pass rushers. Ojulari had a really good year last year. I could see Thibodeau putting it together this year, helping the Giants. And I mean, in a make or break year for Daniel Jones. So I like Thibodeau on the Giants. And give me Jermaine Johnson from the Jets. I think guy really slid. I think he's going to come in this year with a chip on his shoulder. That Jets defense can't be any worse than it was last year. So if they can get some things figured out, Robert Saleh is a defensive guy, so I'm sure he'll love a guy like Jermaine Johnson, the second from Florida State. He'll find some ways to get creative with him this year. But I look for those two guys to have big years on rushing the passer. Yeah, those are my picks for offensive and defensive rookie of the year.
I like it. Yeah, a little bit of dark horse action in there. So, and I feel like a lot of times there's some rookies that we're not even paying that much attention to that just come in and pop off. Like the fact that Micah Parsons slid so far in the draft last year, when we look at what he is now, I mean, that's
That should have been defensive player of the year this year.
Yeah. He was one of the finalists. Yeah.
I will say last year I put preseason bet money on Matt Stafford winning MVP, and damn, it was looking good there for about 8 or 9 weeks of the season. And then they kind of just shit the bed and disappeared, and I was like, But no, I mean, I like it. I think there's I mean, if you are any of the gamblers out there, I feel like there's good value, especially on the Christian Watson pick. I feel like he's kind of a dark horse. But I mean, when you look at it, I feel like in terms of quarterbacks that receivers are going to, this isn't a great quarterback class. Not really sure if any of these guys are going to be for sure day one starters. I think this is a year for another receiver to win Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you look at it that way, Jamar Chase won it last year. Who was his quarterback? A Pro Bowl caliber player, went to the Super Bowl, Joe Burrow. I think Watson has obviously that. Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. So I like the Watson pick, especially in the second round. I don't really think a lot of people are gonna pick him. I feel like they're gonna flock to Olave, Wilson, Drake London. But I like the Watson pick. I'll pat myself on the back a little bit.
That's a great pick, and I honestly could see looking back on it and in the future and seeing you call it this early. So I kind of relate it to, I mean, it's a different position, but how Alvin Kamara slid in his draft a little bit, and then he came in with the Saints and just popped off. I can see the same thing kind of happening with Christian Watson there. But yeah, I think this is going to be a good rookie class. I think people focus so hard on the quarterbacks, but if you look back at this draft and see how many guys fill these holes for the team and are good players that aren't quarterbacks, I think it's going to be really a solid one. So yeah, it was fun. I always enjoyed draft time, so it was good stuff. But yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to add on for this one? Or are we feeling pretty good?
No, I'm feeling good. I mean, yeah, I think it was definitely unexpected to see 4 defensive players go 1, 2, 3, 4, especially when some of these last couple of drafts have been. I mean, last year there was what 3 quarterbacks in the first 4 picks. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a definitely a change up, but no, I mean, I feel like when the quarterback position's weak, a lot of people write off the draft class, but I think there was a lot of value, and teams got some really good players in this draft. And I mean, we could certainly look back on this in a couple of years and be like, damn, a lot of these players were this class was a lot better than what the analysts were expecting. And I mean, I could see that with this class. I think the receiver talent was really good, really deep. Same with the defensive talent and the offensive line talent. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of teams that are really happy after running to the podium to cash in some of their draft cards this year. So we'll see. We'll certainly see what happens after the end of the NFL season. But I feel like when the quarterback class in a draft isn't necessarily star studded, don't necessarily write off the rest of the draft because there's still going to be plenty of really good players. And I mean, I think this is another one of those cases this year.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening to episode 29 of the Should Have Gone Pro podcast. We appreciate all your support as always. We took a little bit of a break there, but we are back. We're going to be back next week. Depending on how these series go, we're going to wait until after the second round of the NBA playoffs is done, and then we're going to talk about some stuff that's happened. We'll tear the Sixers to shreds, and and then we'll talk about the conference finals matchups when they come about. Right now, it's just the Heat that are in, but we got some big game sixes tonight with the Celtics, Bucks, and then Warriors and Memphis. So should be good. So we'll definitely touch on that in the next one. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Definitely Twitter for sure at Gone Pro Pod at Gone Pro Pod. That's where we'll tweet out stuff about the podcast and things like that. You can always message us on whatever you'd like. And yeah, sounds good. So thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate everything, and we will see you next week.